A $500 million contract, the kind that could shape an entire industry and save a corporation from the brink of collapse. Died in the sky before the ink on the agreement had even dried. It did not die in a boardroom, nor at the hands of lawyers or the market. It died with a careless wave and a prejudiced glance in the first-class cabin of Summit Air. Adrian Cole, 44, was not the kind of man who needed to shout to command attention. He carried something far stronger, a silence that could dominate a room. When he stepped into seat 2A on Flight 452 from New York to Chicago, he looked no different than any other accomplished businessman. A charcoal suit cut to perfection, a calm posture, one hand resting lightly on a worn copy of Meditations. But behind that composed exterior lay a power that made the entire aviation industry tremble. A power no one on that plane recognized, not yet. First class glowed under soft amber lights. The warmth of hot towels mingled with a faint citrus scent in the air. Executives typed furiously on laptops. A blonde woman fussed with her pashmina scarf, and Adrian offered a gentle nod to a young flight attendant, Emily Hayes, 2766, reading her name off the tag pinned to her chest. A small habit, but to Emily it felt like sunlight, a fleeting moment of being seen, acknowledged. Adrian lifted a glass of chilled water, eyes drifting over faces too familiar in this quiet club of privilege. He meant to sink back into his book of stoic philosophy until the cabin door burst open, and the calm shattered like a stone through glass. Trevor Langford, 20-9, swaggered in as if the cabin belonged to him. A pink polo collar popped high, gold watch flashing, his booming voice on the phone drowning out every other sound. "If the number doesn't hit 9 digits, don't even bring it to me. Got it?" he barked, slamming the call closed with theatrical finality. His eyes swept the cabin, landing on the empty seat 2B beside Adrian. One quick look from head to toe, a silent valuation. Trevor smirked, dropped his duffel bag on the seat. "Hey, I'm ticketed for 3D, but this spot's open, so I'll just sit here, yeah?" He waved at Emily, as if issuing an order. Emily faltered, her voice trembling, but still carrying the polish of training. "Sir, this seat is reserved for crew rotation on long-haul segments. I'll need to wait until all passengers are boarded," Trevor scoffed, flicking his hand as though brushing away a fly. "Rules, policies, all just paperwork games." Adrian did not look up, only turned another page. But inside his chest tightened, not because of Trevor, but because he had seen this play too many times in his life. The glances from above, the decisions whispered with "someone else deserves it more than you." He recognized the bitter taste of yet another small, corrosive battle. The flight should have lifted in peace. But 10 minutes before departure, Emily returned, walking beside a salt and pepper-haired man, Richard Coleman, the purser. His face was carved in stone. "Sorry to disturb you, sir," Emily whispered, eyes cast down. Adrian closed his book and looked up. "Is there a problem?" Coleman cleared his throat, his words falling like lead. "There's been a booking error. Your seat, 2A, has been reassigned to another passenger. I'm afraid you'll have to move." A heavy silence rippled through the cabin. Adrian lifted his phone, the boarding pass glowing on the screen. Check in time-stamped 20 4 hours earlier. In his briefcase lay a printed copy from the first-class lounge. His voice was steady, free of anger. "I was the first to check in. This ticket is valid. This is not a system error." Behind him, Trevor sighed with exaggerated impatience. "God, more delays. People just want to fly." Coleman did not glance at the boarding pass, nor meet Adrian's eyes. He delivered the second line, the one that would alter the course of aviation history. "The other passenger has special priority. We need this seat. You'll have to move to premium economy, seat 12B. We'll compensate you $500. The cabin froze. Emily swallowed hard, her eyes caught between the command of a superior and the obvious truth. Trevor leaned back, lips curling upward, already savoring victory. For Adrian, the outcome was clear. He had not just lost a seat. He had gained data, damning data on the rot inside Summit Air. He smiled faintly, a smile no one understood. Then he unbuckled his seatbelt. The sharp click rang out, dry and final, the sound of a trigger pulled on a war that would consume an empire. The air in first class felt compressed, as though the cabin itself was holding its breath. Every glance, furtive and sharp, fixed on Adrian Cole, looks filled with curiosity, with cold judgment, with the anticipation of a man losing control, of proving them right, that he did not belong here. But Adrian simply closed his copy of Meditations, marking his place with a finger. The deliberate slowness of the gesture frustrated those who wanted him gone quickly. His heartbeat was steady, neither fast nor slow. It was not resignation. It was calculation. Coleman stood tall, his gravelly voice straining to sound authoritative. "Sir, please cooperate. We do not want to have to call security." Security. The word itself cut like an invisible blade. For any passenger, being dragged from a plane like a criminal was the ultimate humiliation. Coleman knew it. Trevor knew it. And Trevor relished it. Adrian slowly turned his head, meeting the eyes of the young man in the pink polo for the first time. His gaze did not waver, did not flare with anger. It was a gaze that cut straight through. Trevor swallowed hard, but quickly forced a smug grin, trying to mask the tremor that had crept into him. "Listen to me," Trevor drawled. "You're not losing anything. A man like you should be happy with $500. Don't make yourself a joke." The words, "a man like you," dropped into the cabin like lead. Emily's hands shook on the tray she carried. She understood exactly what Trevor meant. Her face flushed with shame, not for herself, but for her airline. Adrian drew a breath, fixing his eyes on Coleman. "This is your final position?" Coleman nodded stiffly, pretending to hold firm. "If you refuse, I'll be forced to call ground security. The decision is final." A pause. The others in the cabin held their breath, hungry for spectacle. A black man dragged from his seat, a video gone viral, an ugly story to trade at cocktail parties. But Adrian denied them that satisfaction. He calmly unbuckled his seatbelt and stood. The click of the latch echoed in the silence. He slipped the book into his leather case, lifted his carry-on. Every motion was precise, decisive, free of panic. As he walked past Trevor, their eyes locked for an instant. Trevor smirked, certain of victory. But deep in Adrian's gaze was something Trevor could not comprehend, the stillness of a man holding life and death power in reserve. Just before reaching the door, Adrian stopped beside Emily. His voice lowered, just enough for her to hear. "I'm sorry you were put in this position." Emily looked up, eyes wet. She saw in him not just a passenger, but a man carrying a humiliation too familiar, yet still choosing to preserve a fragment of dignity for someone else. His words carved deeper than any order from her superiors ever could. Adrian turned and walked away, his posture unbroken, every step falling like the strike of a gavel. He did not look back. He did not need to. A seat could be taken. Dignity could not. As the cabin door closed behind him, the dull thud echoed like a funeral bell for Summit Air. No one in first class understood what had just happened. To them, it was only another passenger removed. But for Adrian, it was living proof, irrefutable data of a system already rotting. He stepped off the jet bridge into the crowded terminal. Announcements blared, hurried footsteps echoed, but all of it receded into the cold silence that surrounded him. His hand tightened around the leather case. The flight might continue, but Summit Air's journey had just ended. A glint flickered in Adrian's eyes, not anger, but resolve. This battle would not be waged with shouting. It would be waged with a single call. And with just one call, an empire would fall. Adrian Cole stepped into the business class lounge, the sound of his black leather shoes striking a steady rhythm against the polished tile floor. Here, the air was different. Leather chairs, the soft chime of crystal glasses, the scent of Arabica coffee mingled with expensive cologne. A world designed to soothe those with money. But to Adrian, it all felt hollow, like a glossy veneer painted over rotting walls. At the reception desk, Brenda looked up, her professional smile perfectly in place. "Welcome back, Mr. Cole. Did you forget something?" Adrian stopped, his voice calm but edged with an icy undertone. "No, Brenda. The plan has changed. I need a private meeting room for 1 hour." She nodded quickly, not daring to ask further, and guided him to a glass-walled room at the end of the hall. The door shut softly, and the outside world vanished. It was just him, a polished wooden table, and the decision born in the cabin minutes earlier. Summit Air had buried itself. Adrian set his leather briefcase on the table and pulled out his phone. The screen lit up with dozens of new emails, party invitations, contract drafts, private meeting schedules, all of it. Now nothing but noise. He ignored them all. There was only one call that mattered. His finger swiped across the screen. After 2 rings, a woman's voice came through, crisp, efficient. "Good morning, Adrian. I thought you'd already be in the air." It was Sophia Ramirez, 39, his right hand, the woman who could run the entire Nova Corps empire with nothing more than a handful of messages. Adrian leaned back, his voice sharp as glass. "Not airborne, Sophia. Summit Air just made a fatal mistake. Cancel tomorrow's 4 o'clock with Lawrence Sterling." There was a pause on the other end, then Sophia's voice dropped to a whisper. "You mean, cancel the $500 million signing?" "Adrian, the contract is ready. Their entire board is flying to Chicago as we speak." "I know." His voice cut across hers, each word falling like the strike of a blade. Send the termination notice. Breach of core values, Clause 4, Section B. Sophia inhaled sharply. She had grown used to Adrian's cold-blooded decisions, yet each time still sent a chill down her spine. He never shouted, never raged. He made decisions the way others ordered coffee. But those decisions could collapse entire corporations. Understood, sir. I'll move it to legal immediately. Adrian gave a small nod, eyes fixed on his own reflection in the glass wall. A calm face stared back at him, but in the eyes there was the flicker of a storm. One more thing, Sophia. Book me to Chicago on any carrier other than Summit. Have a car meet me at LGA or Newark. I won't fly out of JFK anymore. I understand, Sophia answered, her voice taut as a drawn wire. Details in 10 minutes. Adrian ended the call. The silence in the room pressed in, broken only by the sound of his own heartbeat. With a call that lasted less than 2 minutes, he had burned a bridge worth $500 million, a bridge Summit Air believed was theirs to keep. He sat still for a long while. What filled his mind was not the image of Lawrence Sterling with his slick silver hair, nor the thick stacks of contract figures. Instead, he saw Emily's face, the tremor in her eyes as she carried out a wrongful order. He heard Trevor's mocking laugh, the smugness of privilege that required no effort. He remembered Coleman's cold mouth uttering the word security as if it were a weapon. Adrian tightened his grip on meditations. You cannot control the world, but you can control your response. Marcus Aurelius had written it, and Adrian had just proven it. He did not need anger. He needed only one decision. Across the city, Summit Air had no idea its fate had shifted. They were still uncorking champagne, still drafting press releases, still mapping their resurrection. They did not yet know their future had already been cut off in a quiet glass room by a man they thought they could humiliate. Adrian rose. The door opened, and light from the lounge spilled in. Brenda bowed her head. He gave only the faintest nod, walking on with the bearing of a man who had just burned an Emor to the ground, without uttering a word. At Summit Air's headquarters in Dallas, the morning sun poured through towering glass windows, casting a shimmering glow across the marble floor. For Lawrence Sterling, 61 years old, silver hair slicked back, a tan that came from a bottle. Today was supposed to be destiny. The day he would sign a $500 million contract, transforming himself from a man teetering on the edge of bankruptcy into a savior, to be praised. He strode quickly down the carpeted hall, a wide grin stretched across his face. Employees greeted him respectfully, each one catching the scent of victory in his step. Lawrence clapped a hand on the shoulder of his longtime assistant. Martha, I trust the champagne is chilled, and I don't want verve, I want Dom Perignon. Today is history. Yes, Mr. Sterling, Martha replied, handing him an iPad with the draft of the press release. Summit Air reborn with Nova Core dynamics. Words like breakthrough, synergy, and redefining the future had been polished, ready to dazzle the media. Lawrence laughed loudly, as if he had already won. The stock market was celebrating too. Summit's shares had jumped 15% on nothing but rumors of the signing. He tilted his chin higher, already imagining his face on the cover of Fortune. Then the red phone on his desk erupted with a shrill ring. Lawrence frowned. That line was reserved for the highest levels of leadership, used only when something was truly serious. He lifted the receiver. Sterling. On the other end came the voice of David Chen, Chief Legal Counsel. Normally steady and confident, now his voice trembled. Richard, we have a very big problem. Lawrence scowled. Don't tell me Nova Corps' lawyers found a typo in the contract. I don't want to hear about trivialities. Silence. Then David's voice dropped lower. Not a typo. We've just received formal notice of a termination from their legal team, effective immediately. The words struck like lightning. Lawrence shot to his feet, the iPad slipping onto the desk with a thud. What did you say? Terminated. Impossible. The signing is tomorrow. They cited Clause 4, Section B. Violation of core values, David read carefully. It gives them the right to withdraw if they believe we've acted contrary to ethical principles. It's binding. We can't fight it. Sweat broke across Lawrence's forehead. He barked into the phone. Get Adrian Cole on the line. I'll speak to him myself. David exhaled heavily. We tried. His secretary, Sophia Ramirez, said all communications will now go through their legal department. They're refusing direct calls. Lawrence felt the blood drain from his face. A $500 million deal, Summit Air's final lifeline, gone in an instant. He collapsed back into his chair, his mouth dry. When did this happen? He asked hoarsely. 11:04 a.m. New York time, David replied flatly. Lawrence muttered the time back to himself. 11:04. At that moment, Adrian should have been on our own flight to Chicago. A horrifying thought struck him. His head jerked up, eyes wide. David, pull the passenger list for Flight 452 from JFK. I want the incident report from the lead flight attendant. Now! David hesitated. You think? Lawrence roared. Just do it! 20 minutes later, inside the vast executive office, Lawrence, David, and the Vice President of Customer Relations stood around a tablet displaying the incident report. The air was thick, ready to shatter. Lawrence read it once, then again, his hand tightening until his knuckles turned white. Passenger seat 2A, Mr. A. Cole. Disputed reassignment due to system error. After compensation, passenger voluntarily deplaned. Flight delayed 22 minutes. David whispered, Cole. Adrian Cole. The VP blurted out, face drained of color. My God, we kicked the CEO of Nova Corps out of his first-class seat. Lawrence Sterling felt the room spin. A broken no escaped his lips, not the voice of a CEO, but the cry of a man watching his empire sink beneath him. Somewhere above, Summit's plane still soared toward Chicago. But inside headquarters, the company's future was already in freefall, with no chance of a safe landing. The air inside the CEO's office was thick, heavy like smoke after a fire. Lawrence Sterling sank into his leather chair, eyes fixed on the passenger manifest, glowing coldly on the screen. His heart pounded out of rhythm, his ears roared with static. Each word cut like a blade. Mr. A. Cole, seat 2A, deplaned. He muttered, voice strangled. A. Cole, Adrian Cole. We kicked our single most important client off the plane. David Chen, the company's chief legal counsel, swallowed hard. Beside him, Bill, vice president of customer relations, stood frozen before blurting out. But the report says another passenger prioritized. Who was that passenger? Why were they given more priority than Adrian Cole? Lawrence's hand tightened as he scrolled down. A name appeared, and his entire body went rigid. Trevor Langford, his nephew, his sister's son. A chill ran through Lawrence's spine. The world seemed to collapse in an instant. Trevor's arrogant smirk, slicked back hair, and gaudy gold watch flashed in his mind. No, it can't be," Lawrence gasped, eyes wide, his hands trembling. "My foolish nephew. It was him who took the seat." Bill stammered, voice breaking. "You mean a $500 million deal just went up in flames because of a spoiled nephew?" David Chen whispered like a man haunted. Not just the nephew. The purser, Coleman, sided with him. And the cost is the life of Summit Air. Lawrence shot to his feet, as if the room had been stripped of oxygen. He roared, slamming his fist onto the desk. "Get Trevor on the phone. And Coleman, I want his uniform stripped tonight. His career is over." The office phone connected, and just the sound of Trevor's voice made Lawrence want to hurl the receiver across the room. "Uncle Rich, you won't believe it. Today they treated me like a real VIP. Some stranger was in the seat I wanted, but the crew handled it perfectly. They kicked him out and upgraded me to 2A. See? Summit still knows how to respect the Sterling family." For a moment, Lawrence heard nothing but the boiling rush of blood in his ears. Trevor was still bragging, still thinking he had won. Lawrence shut his eyes, his voice dropping low, a growl from deep in his chest. "You fool, that stranger was Adrian Cole, CEO of Nova Core Dynamics, the partner we were supposed to sign a $500 million deal with tomorrow." The line went silent. Then came the sound of Trevor's quickened breathing, followed by his shaky voice. That black man in the grey suit, but he didn't even say anything. He just quietly walked away," Lawrence erupted, his voice thunderous, crashing through the office like a gavel. "He didn't need to say a word, Trevor. One phone call from him has already set Summit Air on fire. Our stock will plunge. The deal is dead, our reputation buried forever. And all of it is because of you." Trevor sputtered excuses. "I didn't know. It was Coleman's fault." But Lawrence slammed the phone down, refusing to hear another word. His hand shook as he placed the receiver back, then dragged down his face as if trying to wipe away a nightmare. But this wasn't a nightmare. This was reality. An empire collapsing under the weight of his own family's arrogance. The office sank into silence. Beyond the glass windows, Dallas shimmered in the midday sun. But inside Lawrence Sterling's heart, the sun had already set. He knew with crushing certainty. Summit Air had just been handed its death sentence. The small apartment on the outskirts of Queens was drowned in darkness. Only the dim yellow light from a desk lamp spilled across the scattered papers on the kitchen table. Emily Hayes sat motionless, her hands gripping the flight attendant badge she had removed the moment she came home. The cold metal pressed into her palms, a constant reminder of the worst morning of her career. The scene kept replaying in her mind. Trevor Langford's smug smile, Purser Coleman's icy face, and above all, the calm, almost heartbreaking look in Adrian Cole's eyes as he left his seat. He hadn't blamed her. He had only said softly, "I'm sorry you were put in this position." Those words weighed on her like 1,000 pounds. Emily's hands shook as she opened her notebook and scribbled messy lines. Glitch or Coleman's orders. Passenger 2A, Cole. Platinum status. Humiliated in public. She scratched out words, rewrote them, as if the pen could erase her guilt. Coleman's voice echoed in her head. You need to cooperate, or we'll call security. She remembered clearly how he avoided Adrian's eyes, how everything unfolded like a script rehearsed in advance. Emily asked herself, what did I do? She had stayed silent. She had let the injustice happen. No one had struck her. No one had insulted her. But it was her silence that had made her complicit. She unlocked her phone, scrolling through her contacts. Family, friends, none of them could help. She thought back to one night a month earlier, watching a documentary about corruption in the banking industry. A name had been mentioned, Michael Chen, investigative journalist for the Wall Street Journal. He had exposed corporate giants before, turning hidden stories into firestorms of public outrage. Emily's fingers trembled as she opened the encrypted messaging app she had installed long ago, but never dared to use. A blank chat window appeared. Her heart pounded as she typed each word. My name is Emily Hayes. I was a flight attendant in first class on Summit Air Flight 452 this morning. I need to tell you something. This isn't a system glitch. This was prejudice. And I witnessed everything. She hesitated. If she sent it, her career was over. Summit Air would fire her, maybe even sue her for breach of confidentiality. But if she stayed silent, the ghost of guilt would haunt her forever. Emily drew a deep breath, snapped a photo of her employee badge, and attached it with the message, "This is proof I am not lying." Her finger tapped send. The screen flashed a green tick. The message had reached Michael Chen. A terrifying silence filled the room. Emily let the phone fall onto the table and buried her face in her hands. Yet in her heart, a small flame had been lit. She was no longer the silent accomplice. She had just opened the door for the world to see the truth. And from a tiny apartment in Queens, that flame would swell into a media storm powerful enough to sweep away the entire Summit Air empire. 6 a.m. Wednesday. While New York City still slumbered under a veil of grey mist, a bombshell exploded on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. The headline screamed in bold, "Billion-dollar bigotry. One first, class seat, $500 million, and the truth about Summit Air." Byline, Michael Chen. The article was long, every word as sharp as a blade. Chen meticulously recounted the events of that morning. A black CEO, humiliated in the first-class cabin, forced to give up his seat to a loud white passenger. A system glitch? No. The testimony of Emily Hayes, backed by her employee badge, shredded that lie into pieces. Highlighted excerpts from Emily's statement blazed across the page. He wasn't angry. He just stood up, as if he had lived through this 1,000 times before. And I stayed silent. The piece included stills from passenger phone recordings. Trevor Langford leaning back with a smug grin. Purser Coleman sternly issuing the order. Adrian Cole rising quietly from his seat. Images cold and unvarnished, needing no commentary. By 7:30 a.m., Social media was ablaze. On X, Twitter, the hashtag #BoycottSummitAir shot to #1 worldwide. Thousands of users poured in their own bitter stories with the airline. I was denied an upgrade even as a platinum member. Summit always favored white passengers, and now it's undeniable. We pay to be humiliated? Videos of people cutting up their membership cards and tearing boarding passes flooded feeds. Memes spread at lightning speed. Summit's glossy slogan, "Service above all," mocked side by side with the words, "System glitch." The world was laughing at them. At 9:30 a.m., the New York Stock Exchange bell rang. Summit Air's ticker, SUM, bled red, plunging like a stone. Within 60 minutes, over $1, $2 billion in market value evaporated. Investors screamed, sell orders piled up. Trading floors descended into chaos. Meanwhile, Michael Chen dropped more evidence. Leaked internal emails revealing Coleman had long been instructed to prioritize familiar passengers, even when against policy. A line highlighted in red seared like blood across the screen. Never let VIPs complain. Always find a way, even if it means bending the rules. In her small apartment, Emily sat with her phone buzzing non-stop under a storm of messages. Some cheered her bravery, others threatened her. But fear had given way to relief. She had thrown a stone into the pond, and the ripples had become a tidal wave. Up high in Summit's Dallas headquarters, Lawrence Sterling stood in his office as though drowning. The massive screen before him pulsed with headlines. Summit Air in freefall, record stock plunge, massive customer cancellations. Outside the windows, the sun blazed bright. But to him, the sky was midnight black. He whispered hollowly, eyes vacant. One seat, just one seat, burned down the empire. And the crisis had only just begun. That afternoon, the press room at Summit Air headquarters was packed. Camera lights blazed, dozens of lenses aimed squarely at the podium. Lawrence Sterling walked out, his usual polish gone. His face was pale, his eyes sunken from sleepless nights. The dark blue suit that yesterday looked like armor now hung crookedly on him, unable to hide his panic. He opened the folder before him, his voice trembling. Summit Air expresses its deepest regret for the unfortunate incident on Flight 452. This was an isolated event, not a reflection of our core values. We are committed. A reporter's voice cut through like a hammer. Mr. Sterling, the Wall Street Journal confirmed that the passenger removed from his seat was Adrian Cole, CEO of Novacore Dynamics. Is that correct? The room froze. Lawrence cleared his throat, dodging. I cannot comment on passenger identities for confidentiality reasons. Another reporter shouted, You cannot comment, or you dare not. And the passenger who was given priority for that seat, was it your nephew, Trevor Langford? The words, your nephew, cracked through the air like a bullet. Cameras zoomed in on Lawrence's face. Sweat broke across his brow. He stammered, This was a matter of individual crew judgment. We have taken strict action. A female reporter rose, her voice like a blade. So you are lying in front of millions of viewers? An internal witness provided evidence. Are you saying Summit Air has special policies for executives' relatives while paying first-class customers are thrown out? The hall erupted into chaos, shutters snapping furiously. Lawrence opened his mouth, but the apology turned to ash. His throat burned dry. He knew any word would only fan the flames. And indeed, social media exploded even before the press conference ended. Clips of Sterling stammering denials were spliced into memes, spreading like wildfire under the caption, "Glitch or Nepotism." Meanwhile, thousands of miles away, Adrian Cole sat quietly in the first-class cabin of Orion Airways, Summit's fiercest rival. The leather seat was soft, the attendants served with genuine smiles, no trace of pretense. He didn't glance at his phone, though he knew the media storm was howling outside. On the table before him sat only a cup of hot tea and his worn copy of Meditations. In the still cabin, he reread a line he had underlined long ago. "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." This was not revenge. It was a business decision, backed by data. And Adrian Cole now held the most valuable data of all. Summit Air was not just wrong, it was rotten to the core. The next day, Nova Core Dynamics released a brief statement. "We believe dignity is a non-negotiable asset. Our partners must share that belief." They never mentioned Summit by name, but everyone knew. The stock market reacted instantly. Orion Airways' shares soared, while Summit's chart plunged further into freefall. Investors now looked at Sterling as if he were the captain of a sinking ship, stammering on the deck. Lawrence Sterling left the press conference, surrounded by reporters, his hands shaking uncontrollably. He knew that from this moment on, every word he spoke would echo only in the ruins. And Adrian Cole? He had chosen silence, and that silence, louder than any speech, had sunk Summit Air. The electronic board at the New York Stock Exchange glowed red like a sea of blood. Summit Air's ticker, SUM, plunged like a stone hurled into an abyss. In just 3 hours of trading, more than $2.7 billion in market value evaporated. Investors screamed, phones rang incessantly, and the avalanche of sell orders grew so overwhelming that the system had to halt trading for several minutes. In Dallas, the Summit Air boardroom felt like a pressure cooker ready to explode. Board members sat in a semicircle, their faces hardened with tension. Lawrence Sterling entered, his suit wrinkled, tie loosened. He was no longer the polished CEO, but an old man stripped of his mask. "Lawrence," a deep voice came from the head of the table, the chairman tapping his pen against the wood. "Do you realize what has happened? Because of one first-class seat, we lost the biggest contract in our history, and our stock is now in free fall." Sterling leaned against the table, his voice hoarse. I could not have foreseen this. It was the action of an individual, a flight attendant, and—" A female board member cut him off, her eyes flashing with fury. "An individual? You intend to blame a staff member? The press already has evidence your nephew sat in that seat. You think we haven't read it?" The room erupted in a storm of accusations. Fists slammed on the table. Voices shouted about destroyed investor trust and customers abandoning the airline. Sterling tried to push back, but his voice weakened with every word, drowning in a wave of rage. He knew it. His power had died alongside Flight 452. Elsewhere, however, the story carried another tone. Emily Hayes sat in her small apartment, her old laptop open on a news page. Her image, the photo of her employee badge alongside her testimony, spread across every media outlet. From an anonymous flight attendant, she had become a whistleblower the entire nation now recognized. Thousands of messages flooded her inbox. Thank you for daring to speak the truth. You gave us hope that justice still exists. Tears welled up and fell onto the keyboard. Emily had no idea what her career would become. Summit would certainly fire her, perhaps even sue her. But for the first time, she felt she had worth. She had chosen rightly. Adrian Cole sat in his Chicago office, quietly following the events unfold. He felt neither glee nor sorrow. His eyes held only certainty. Summit Air did not deserve trust. The decision to cancel the contract was not vengeance, it was strategy. On his desk lay an internal report. Proposed partnership, Orion Airways. Adrian closed it and turned his gaze toward the vast blue sky over Chicago. He knew clearly that while one door had shut, a larger one had just opened. Meanwhile, Lawrence Sterling slumped in the boardroom chair, arguments still crashing around him like thunder. He knew that within days the board would force his resignation, and the name Summit Air, the pride of his life, would be reduced to a cautionary tale in business school textbooks. One seat, just one seat, but it had burned an entire empire to the ground. 6 months later, Summit Air's headquarters in Dallas was nothing more than an empty shell. The once gleaming gold-plated logo on the rooftop had been torn down, replaced by the sign of another airline that had bought Summit for pennies, like salvaging the wreck of a sunken ship. Lawrence Sterling no longer sat in the leather chair of his 50th floor office. He left the company in silence, forced to sign his resignation after the stock collapsed to rock bottom and the board of directors revolted. The press branded him the Titanic captain, a man blinded by his own arrogance until his ship struck the iceberg. And Trevor Langford? His name became the symbol of arrogance and entitlement. Online, memes mocked him as the to-be kid, the spoiled heir who destroyed $500 million just to claim a window seat. The Sterling family cut ties with him while he hid in his luxury apartment, too ashamed to show his face in public. But the fall of one empire marked the rise of another. Inside a gleaming glass tower in Chicago, Adrian Cole signed an exclusive partnership with Orion Airways. The deal was smaller than what Summit had offered, but that did not matter. What he sought was not just money, but trust. Orion had proven that trust from the very first flight that brought him to Chicago. A peaceful first-class seat, genuine service, and an atmosphere untainted by prejudice. As he set his pen down, Adrian said quietly, "We are not just selling technology. We are selling trust, and Orion will be the proof." The room erupted in applause. The markets reacted instantly. Orion's stock surged, while Adrian's company, Novacore Dynamics, became a global symbol of integrity in business. Elsewhere in the story, Emily Hayes walked into a new office, no longer a Summit flight attendant, but now a customer policy advisor for Orion Airways. After being fired by Summit for violating her NDA, she received a direct offer from Orion's leadership. They called her the brave whistleblower and gave her the chance to turn a bitter experience into a guiding principle for change. On her first day at Orion, as she walked through the hallway, she saw her own image on the company's internal screens with the words, "Integrity starts with one voice." She smiled, placing her hand over her chest. For the first time in years, she felt proud of herself. The world would remember Flight 452 not as a minor incident, but as a warning. One moment of prejudice could burn down an entire deal, even an entire company. And on his office bookshelf, Adrian Cole still kept the old, worn copy of Meditations. Every time his eyes fell on it, he remembered that cold moment in first class, the moment when one calm decision erased an entire empire. He had once read a line from Marcus Aurelius, "You cannot control the world, but you can control how you respond." Adrian had chosen to respond with silence, and then with one phone call, and that was enough to change the entire airline industry. Summit Air died in disgrace. Orion Airways rose in trust. One first-class seat, one decision, one legacy. In the world of business, people often assume that billion-dollar decisions are made only in boardrooms lined with polished wood or at grand signing ceremonies under the glare of flashbulbs. But the story of Flight 452 shows us that sometimes the decision that changes an entire industry comes from a single first-class seat and one fleeting moment of prejudice. Adrian Cole did not shout, did not rage, did not respond with chaos. He simply walked away in silence, then used the strength of reason to make a cold, deliberate choice. And that choice erased an empire that had stood for decades. Summit Air thought they were merely reassigning a passenger. In truth, they were trading away the future of their company for the arrogance and privilege of one individual. The price they paid was total collapse. This story reminds us of a simple truth. Human dignity is not a gift to be given or taken. It is a foundation, an asset beyond negotiation. Any organization that forgets this principle, no matter how powerful, will eventually destroy itself. If you believe that true value is not found in status or skin color, but in how we treat one another, then press like and subscribe to continue with us as we uncover stories that expose injustice and affirm fairness. And before you go, leave a comment with the simple phrase, human dignity, to show that you, like Adrian Cole, believe that principle and dignity are priceless assets, worth more than any billion-dollar deal.